had the cops claim in court that people weren't willing to help me. And although that is only slightly true, people knew what help I needed. They knew that I needed them to speak up about their small part. But they wanted to go out of their way just to do the texting thing or to talk over me about their assumptions from what they heard. Well, don't tell me what you heard. If you're going to tell me that you trust me and use that as an excuse to not look at the evidence that proves that what you heard is bullshit, that ain't my fault. Without somebody else going in with me, none of these people are going to take it seriously. Now, with the folks who wanted to say that they went in with me, you know, it sort of. The day that me and Miss Peaches both went into the, that would be the 29th of December of 2017, both went into the Broomfield Police Department. Miss Peaches went in her vehicle and I went in a squad car, and I was put in one room and Miss Peaches was put in another. What Miss Peaches tried to explain to them about how they needed to talk to me in order to get the best information possible, well, they went out of their way to make sure that they did the opposite. With the people who tried to help me, the problem is that they didn't speak up. Now, there were people who were trying to help me all along, and I was being cut off from their help, and I was frustrated. With people threatening to kill my family, and all these people, hundreds of people, all said and done, telling me that they're afraid for their kids, they're afraid for their families, that their families have been threatened, that they've been threatened, that the cops have threatened them. I've even got conversations with some of their predators admitting to it, like Cara Rogers and Aaron Cockerham. You see, in court, I was called a liar for saying that these people were trying to help me and that I was cut off from getting their help. And outside of court, I get called ungrateful because these people helped me and I'm pretending that they never helped. No, I spoke out about the help that they provided. I also spoke out about why it didn't work. I also recorded conversations with these people about why it didn't work. All these people wanted to run with assumptions and they wouldn't help me unless I did what they wanted, but I had to do what they wanted by myself. It doesn't matter what I do if I have to do it by myself. They called me mentally ill. They won't look at evidence. My public pretenders did everything they could. You got 30 days for what's called discovery. And my public pretenders made sure that they did jack shit for at least the first 90 days, because some of it's protected for 90 days. They did everything they could to make sure that I had charges on me so I couldn't turn them in. They did everything they could to mislead me and lie to me and mislead the courts. They did everything that they could to prevent me from turning in my predators. And the fact is, the conversations with Mandy Hughes, the conversations with Katie, the conversations with, pretty much all the conversations that I've had that are recorded and put up on YouTube, they show I've been telling the truth since day one. Just because it doesn't fit what these true crime things want to sell you, just because it's not what my predators want you to believe, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Look, please. I mean, I want you to seriously look at all these people who are angry at me. They want to be angry because they so-called tried to help. They never spoke up about it. That's the problem. The cops slandered the fuck out of me in court. They lied out their asses. And when I tried to show the truth, because these people weren't coming forward. They weren't speaking up. They were putting many lives at risk. They made things worse for the homeless by doing this. They made things worse for autistic people by doing this, by allowing this false narrative to be sold to the American public and the world at large. I am now alone in this parking lot. I have no friends here, no one to protect me, nobody to hold a camera if the police decide to do something messed up. And that is something that I have to be afraid of. There's a lot of people who said they would help and keep on promising, and then always something comes up. Sarah Bacon for 6 years has been doing that. 5 years, sorry. Always something that comes up. And I feel bad for her, but at the same time, I'm the one who is going through 5 extra years of abuse waiting on her to come forward and speak up. All these people who claim that they did these things, I wasn't there for it. I can't vouch for the fact that they did or didn't do it. They have no evidence and have produced no evidence that they've done any such thing. How am I supposed to believe them? And then there's the fact that people want to call me up drunk and tell me about how they really care, how they really fought for me, how they advocated for me. You know what? I was in court. No, they didn't. They didn't produce any evidence. I have plenty of evidence to produce. Just a matter of getting it seen. As far as the internet issues that I have, you know, I paid a lot of people to teach me how to do that stuff that never did. Thank goodness them young'uns come through to at least help me with the Wi-Fi hotspot. This is too much work for one person to do, especially without the resources to do it. These officers were allowed to continually break the law and continually abuse me physically, psychologically, and financially, to separate me from my evidence and destroy evidence, and to coordinate with those who I was trying to turn in for their crimes to assist them in getting away with those crimes. Scott DaCosta knew all the way in 2018, at least as early as May, that I was trying to turn in his department for the way that they handled those situations prior. How inappropriate it was that he didn't even look at it, because he claimed that my friend said I was bipolar, and somehow bipolar just magically makes it okay to commit crimes against people in Dual County, apparently. Yeah, that was my first interaction with Scott DaCosta. Sorry, my second interaction with Scott DaCosta. First one was when I went in and got the body cams from that night. Only half of them are there. Why is it that they have so much that is omitted, that is gone, that is non-existent? Why is it that so many times they did not have their body cameras on and repeatedly made it their word versus mine? Why is it they're so well invested in destroying evidence, getting their hands on my evidence, and manipulating the courts and their positions? You don't just magically recover after having your name destroyed the way that mine was. Nobody actually cares. They show that they don't actually care. Anyone could actually stop and say, you know what, Sean? I do care. I do want to change laws. I do want to make sure that people are not abused in that way anymore. Yes, I am willing to look at your evidence and help you. But you got to speak out. If you're too afraid to do that, all you can do is generalize, or you can only speak out about perfect victims. Victims that were able to do things in a nicer way because they had support. Like Zayd Atkinson. Oh yeah, he's a pretty ass poster boy, ain't he? It's like Johnny Depp. He's a pretty poster boy too. Problem is, Johnny Depp is a fucking scourge. We get to see a lot of these very same women that want to tell us how horrible all men are. And when it comes to Johnny Depp, oh, Johnny Depp is the victim. They've been screaming that since before there was ever a trial. And you get to hear them talking throughout that trial, throughout that defamation about jars of, oh my God. Like, yeah, you know, in comparison with that whole defamation thing, what they're talking about in court is a whole nother level. I mean, it shows that these people truly are above the law. There's a lot of drug dealers I tried to turn in, but not because they're drug dealers. The problem is, when you're called mentally ill, anyone can victimize you at any point in time. The problem with getting blown off and told that I gotta go to Dual County Sheriff's Department to turn in Dual County Sheriff Scott Costa to himself. They won't do it. The amount of evidence that has been destroyed because of the crimes of other individuals is not acceptable. And those crimes are up to and including failure to report. That's right, folks. If you're a professional in nearly every single state, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a priest, if you're a preacher, if you're a cop, if someone comes to you to tell you about abuse they're going through, you do have to take a report. And as far as making the situation worse and going out of your way to treat a victim like they're the predator, that is not an appropriate line of questioning. You've got someone who is a vulnerable adult and they're scared shitless and they're having problems putting their words together even. And the more you interrupt them to tell them that nothing matters, that none of the abuse that they continue to go through matters, that they need to forget about the abuse that has resulted in them being in this situation and resulted in their financial crush and resulted in living in this fucking filth. Want to tell me I chose this? No, I didn't. People victimize me whether I speak out or not. Now, whether someone is delusional or telling the truth, and there is some debate about that, because delusional people often do think they're telling the truth. But if you can produce evidence that shows that you're telling the truth, you're not delusional. You're telling the truth. You have evidence that you're telling the truth, and that evidence is the difference between being delusional or not. When the cops take away all of your evidence and then they go telling people that you're delusional and schizophrenic, they're committing felonies at that point. They are doing what's called practicing medicine without a license. That's a really bad idea. Marcia Estrada, she said that my stuff is situational, and she's absolutely right. That's what I said from the beginning. When it's situational, drugs don't help. Medications do not help. The situation that is preventing a person from being treated like a human being, the situation that that person is being abused in. That's what needs to be remedied. It's not that person's fault that they're being victimized. They weren't raped because of a chemical imbalance. They weren't beaten up because of a chemical imbalance. They weren't assaulted because of a chemical imbalance. They weren't illegally imprisoned because of a chemical imbalance. The greatest thing about how open these idiots were in law enforcement with committing their crimes is that it's blatant. I mean, they're showing that I was telling the truth the whole time with their own paperwork. They're showing that they went out of their way to assist any and all of my predators. They're showing that it is a conflict of interest for them to investigate anything after knowing that I am trying to turn them in, because every time that I got on YouTube and Facebook and said that I was ready to turn them in, that I had help, that I had a place to go and a place to work on it that was safe, they went out of their way to guarantee that they cut me off from that through false charges over and over again. When you're not allowed to speak up in court, none of your witnesses are allowed to speak up in court. Your public pretender absolutely refuses to talk to those witnesses or find out what's going on, absolutely refuses to defend you in court. And they repeatedly have court without you even present. These are not things that are okay. But also, the way that they broke the law to prevent me from turning them in prevents me even further from turning them in and creates an even greater safety risk. The fact that law enforcement is able to utilize any law enforcement from a surrounding jurisdiction up to and including the FBI, that's right, the FBI and the Secret Service. Now, you can listen to the conversation with Dan Favorite, and you can tell that, yes, he can verify at least one of those services called him. And he can probably get a hold of his service provider at the time, give them his old phone number, and get the information that he needs. The problem is, at this point, he'd have to go through thousands of phone numbers. You know, it should have been something that dawned on him at the time that he should take a screenshot and save that. Then we could find out which one it was that actually called him, but at least he verified that it happened. The problem is that so long after the fact, how well is he going to remember all the facts? Especially when most people want to remember themselves in the most positive light, and there are some fucked up things that he did. The fact that he no longer has those phones and I no longer have those phones is another result of this extreme poverty and this extreme victimization situation that I've been forced into. Cops won't do anything about the crimes against homeless people. They force you to move on, and then once you've moved on, it costs you a lot of money to move on, doesn't it? But the consequences are still there, so you still have to try to get a court date. The abuse that you are enduring, being cut off from any sort of a support network that you had, being prevented from showing the truth, having your evidence fucking stolen, not just by the public, but also by police. To have your name slandered not only in public and on the news and in these so-called true crime groups, but also in court, and you were never allowed to defend yourself. You were denied access to legal materials. Sure, they pretend, they put on a good show, but the problem is that's why there needs to be audio recording devices. And that's why the cameras need to not just point at inmates in these places, they need to also point at the nurses' station, and they need to point at the officers' stations, so that when they're being antagonized, they can be punished for their crimes. These officers know where they can stand to be off camera and be the most antagonistic. When you're being victimized by the officers and you try to turn it in, they make some cockamamie excuse why you didn't fill out the paperwork right. When they do that to other inmates and you fill out one of those things to try to turn them in, they tell you you can't turn in the officers for another inmate. It's bad enough that they do that to human beings, even if those human beings are convicted of crimes. I wasn't convicted of a crime. I was literally in prison to make sure that I couldn't be close enough to the help that I needed to get out of jail and actually get access to my evidence and show what those officers were doing. The problem is that Nebraska State Patrol was helping them to get away with it. Nebraska State Patrol Trooper Lassen took part in the assault against me on December 16th of, I believe it was 2020. January of 2021, when I was assaulted by Robert Warnick after him stalking me for over a year, threatening my life on more than one occasion. I tried to turn him in. Pastor Rod Wright was there, and so was Sean Holloway, and they showed that they're not real human beings. They're pieces of crap. This is an officer of the law and a man who calls himself a pastor. By law in, well, pretty much any state, those are considered mandated reporters. Then when you compound it with the fact that in Nebraska, it doesn't matter whether you call yourself a pastor or not. Every man, woman, and child in that state is a mandated reporter. The elder laws follow the child laws. The disabled laws follow the elder laws. Mandated reporters are mandated to report on all three. Did they? Also, in the state of Nebraska, the fact that I told them about the crime committed against me means that they had to do something about it. Just the fact that I told them meant that they needed to provide me with assistance. The fact that my disabilities prevent me from defending myself is something that should have been a top priority. They want to focus on just the slander and ignore the abuse, the actual assaults that I'm trying to turn in. They want to force me to move to other places. Meg Messigatis, my own autism advocate, as well as Penny Cooper, as well as the officers, as well as, God, what's her name? Marcia Estrada, all wanted to pressure me to move elsewhere. I've moved elsewhere. I needed help with these things, telling me to do these things that I'm not able to do for myself. I need someone there and present, someone to be a witness, so I don't have to record these things and post them up. But at the same time, even if you're a witness, you know, after years, especially when you're pissed off at me, you might slightly warp the reality of the situation, which is why it's good that I have the recordings. It shows that at the time, the things that you said versus the stuff you want to say now that you're pissed off, you can't do that. Just like the court of law, if they're going to call me crazy, they got to stick with it. They can't call me crazy to prevent me from showing evidence, and then I'm magically not crazy when it comes to sentencing. No. You guys want to tell me all about how the law works? No. You get to see in the Johnny Depp case that none of the stuff you're telling me is true in that situation. None of that stuff is true in most of these situations. You guys want to talk about getting rid of guardianship. Look at what I'm going through without a guardian. Marcia Estrada herself in those recordings, you get to hear her. I'm telling her outright I have needed a guardian for the entirety of my adult life. She's telling me that I don't want a state-appointed guardian. She's telling me that I need to get somebody else who can do it. Nobody else is going to do it. Am I going to ask an alcoholic to do that? I can't trust an alcoholic. Most of these people didn't tell me that they were alcoholics before I got there. When they offered me help and I got there and they were alcoholics, you know what? That was fucking hell. They don't want to admit that they were alcoholics. Shannon Alvarado even has a built-in excuse. Her daughter. She can just blame everything on her daughter. It's tough raising a daughter like that, so she has to drink. It's tough raising a daughter like that, so she has to treat everybody else like crap. Anybody who stands up to her after she started drinking. So you can't stand up to yourself. During the day, she'll almost kind of sort of barely listen, but you know when she starts getting agitated. And it's scary. At least I knew like clockwork when it was going to be. She was going to say she'd start helping me as soon as her daughter went to bed. But then she'd start drinking at 6 and she was drunk by 6:30. She had good intentions. She just didn't have any follow through. She exposed Kara Johnson Miles. And Kara Johnson Miles did everything that she could, and so did Rochelle Shelley Campbell and Danica Garner, to hide everything that they had taken part in. Every communication between us they wanted to pretend was me. I don't know what, because they didn't show it in its entirety, and I wasn't allowed at court. Repeatedly, I was prevented from going to court, over and over again. And my predators got to win in court because I was never allowed to show evidence. I had no help in preparing this. I had no location to sit and work on these things in peace and quiet. The help that I hired, they wanted to be busy doing drugs and alcohol and talking non-fucking stop and coming up with the most cockamamie fucking holy shit goddamn conspiracy theories. And I'm like, that doesn't fit the facts. I get that you're trying to help me, but shut the fuck up and look at the evidence. I don't give a fuck about your goddamn conspiracy theories. Yeah, sure, maybe the CIA got involved and hired Ted to do some clandestine. No, that didn't fucking happen. There's no evidence of CIA anything. There's no evidence of clandestine nothing at it. Jesus fuck. Come on, people. When you get messed out of your fucking gourds and you get drunk out of your minds and then you have oxygen deprivation and you're fucking talking 1,000,000 miles an hour, you're not listening to the victim. You're scaring them. Shannon Alvarado doesn't want to stop to think how scary she was. Britt Roloff and his girlfriend at the time, Amber, don't want to stop to realize how scary they were. Lanny Engeline doesn't want to stop to consider how scary she was. Joshua Eichelberger didn't want to stop to consider how scary he was. And these people weren't just scary to me. In one of the conversations I had with Tabitha Michelle Cook, I didn't say Josh's name, but she heard that video. She knew exactly who I was talking about because that story was true. She knew it was true. She was there that morning when Joshua Eichelberger was yelling at those 3-year-olds, one of them being his own daughter, one of them being Tabby's granddaughter, both 3 years old. And here's Joshua calling these 2 3-year-olds cunts. Holy hell. I use that word for a reason. If you get innocent people harmed or killed, that's exactly the word I'm going to use for you. I'm not going to use it for a couple of 3-year-olds. Joshua Eichelberger's alcoholism was out of control. Most of the stuff with Graham was due to misunderstandings because every time, it's not that I wasn't paying him to help. I absolutely was. The problem is that just because I was paying him doesn't mean that Joshua Eichelberger wasn't going to get drunk and absolutely need attention right that moment every time that I was getting any sort of attention from Graham. So then when I was in chapel, Graham didn't know shit about what was going on. All of his time had gotten eaten up either by Joshua Eichelberger or everybody in the house was busy on walking on eggshells because they were afraid of Joshua Eichelberger and his next fucking tantrum. And they want to, in each of these situations, try to come up with little shit to pretend I'm a bad person. Forget about all of the stuff that I did for them. Very one-sided. Well, guess what? I don't forget the things they did for me. Those are exactly the things they needed to speak up about. The fact that they threw those things in my face as if I was ungrateful. No, I'm absolutely grateful for those things. I'm ungrateful for the fact that you never spoke up. I had to record conversations with you and screenshot all of our Facebook Messenger and all of our texts in between one another because you never spoke up. While people treated me like I was schizophrenic for saying these things that you later threw in my face as if I was ungrateful for. No, all I needed you to do was admit that those things were true and you are a human being. You're not a figment of my imagination like they're claiming. These things did happen, like I claimed from the start. Now you want to throw a tantrum as if I'm a bad person because you didn't speak up? Knowing that I was being victimized, knowing that I was being abused. Don't be a stupid shit. A lot of people I love very much are very fucking dead. Because I wasn't heard. Because your pretty words were more important than finding out what the fuck is happening. Your happy-go-lucky snorting shit up your goddamn nose is more important than your own fucking family. You don't even want to hear about what I've been through. It fucks up your buzz. There are so many people in Chapel. Wendell McPhee, my God, I've got probably, it might be an exaggeration, but I don't know. I might have 1,000 hours of recordings with him that I got to go through. And most of it is him complaining and bitching and whining and moaning about people in town. That's what people do in small towns. They get drunk or they do drugs and they talk about everybody else. Wendell's not real big on that, actually. He says that a lot right before he starts talking about people in town. I found out that Sandy Fromm was trying to hire somebody to kill me from Wendell McPhee, and it is recorded, him telling me that. I've also got it recorded where she's talking about literally the first and last name of the guy that she was trying to hire to kill me. His name is Tim. He lives right down the street from where Wendell McPhee lives. And people want to make the excuse of, well, she was drunk. No. That is not an excuse. That makes it worse. Because she's drunk, she might follow through with some of this crazy shit. Then there's some of other Sandy Fromm's victims, like Toby Smith, and I've been telling you about him for years too, huh? He's never going to forgive me. But he's also a victim of Sandy Fromm. He had to get a protection order against her. She was trying to break into his house. She was stalking him. She was trying to get me involved in stalking him. She was trying to get Wendell McPhee involved in stalking him. Wendell McPhee thought it was hilarious and thought that Toby Smith deserved it. Now, that absolutely ain't the truth. Now, these things are all verifiable. That's the great thing about all of this. All this stuff, all this slander that I can prove is slander. That they used to literally have me falsely imprisoned repeatedly. To have me literally, physically, psychologically, and financially tortured. To prevent me from being able to turn them in. Repeatedly threatened, harassed, intimidated, and assaulted. And it's nobody's job to do anything about it. Adult Protective Services didn't care about any of the abuse. They told me to go to Dual County Sheriff's Department. I said, that's conflict of interest. I'm trying to turn in Dual County Sheriff's Department because they refused to do anything about repeated violence against me prior. They kept on telling me that I had to do it in a way that I was not capable. knowing full well that under the First Amendment, I have the right to have someone there if I cannot defend myself. If I am not capable of defending myself, I have the right to have someone there who can. But they can't defend me if they're not going to find out what the fuck is even going on. How many more bodies we got to come up with? How many more corpses? I want you to look up Selena Not Afraid. I want you to see what happened to her. I want you to look up Frida Noses Gun. I want you to see what happened to her. I want you to look up Natalie Bollinger and see what happened to her. The day Frida Noses Gun disappeared from Washington State en route to Hardin, Montana, is the last day that I ever saw Natalie Bollinger. It was at Elliott's Coffee Grounds. Well, that's where we went. The last time I saw her was when she got out of my vehicle. Her sister actually drove my car that night. Natalie always did what her sister wanted. She just wanted her sister to be happy. People need to take this seriously. All the things that were done to me are against the law, but it only matters if you care. It's only against the law if you care. My predators have been able to create a situation where I literally will never get an honest day in court ever again in my life. All of that from Waylon Lolotai. That right there is the pivotal moment. I had one chance to fight that, and that all came down to Candace Bondurant. When she was victimized by Michael Beard of the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department, and threatened with being thrown out into the January snow, and it was an exceptionally cold January. That wasn't okay. These people want to tell me about how happy I should be that they provided things that didn't work and throw that in my face. Like, I'm glad you tried, but the least you can do is admit that it didn't work. But no, you don't want to admit that part because, well, you're a scared little rat. You're a scared little cockroach hiding in a crack in the wall, trying to make yourself as small as possible so you don't get seen. You don't want to be associated, even though they're false allegations. You don't care. You don't want to be associated. There's all these people that are mandated reporters that I've spoken to, and I do need to turn them all in, and I do need to turn most of them in discreetly. Because they shouldn't have to be afraid of losing their jobs if they come forward and tell the truth. They're mandated reporters. They'll lose their job and not be allowed to have a job like that again if they don't mandated report. So, I mean, really, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Catch-22, kind of like the situation I'm in. I'm not a bad person for being victimized. I'm not a bad person for trying to get help, for speaking out, for begging for help. I asked first. Then I begged. Then I screamed. And then you pretend I'm a bad person because I was backed into a corner and punished until I literally had to scream for help. That's no kind of a friend.